want to? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to make a very brief contribution on the Revenue Miscellaneous Provisions Bill, and to say from the outset, Mr. Speaker, that I'm very passionate about this bill. I do not support it. I'm totally against it, philosophically against it. And Mr. Speaker, I must say that I'm very disappointed in the member for St. John's Rural City West, the Honourable Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. I've known the Honourable member for in excess of 30 years, maybe more. I've known the Honourable member to be a very compassionate human being. And I'll start out by answering his question. He asked, or he made an assertion, it's not a right. Yes, he's correct, it's not a right. But over the years, both for many years under the Labour Party administrations, surely over 28 years and under V.C. Bird and Lester Bird administration, and 10 years under the Gaston Brown administration, and 10 years under the UPP administration, it has become part of the psyche of this country, part of the DNA of the people of this country, that they've been accustomed. And it has never, ever has been so exaggerated in the numbers as it has been under the Gaston Brown administration from 2014, when we became the government, to 2024. So yes, it's not a right, Mr. Speaker. We all know it's not a right. But people have been accustomed to it, especially the poor young persons in this country. First time people leaving school and getting a job for the first time in this country, who cannot afford 100% duty and the revenue recovery charge. And historically, you know, that revenue recovery charge, member for St. Paul's reminded me at lunchtime, really was brought in to actually pay the overtime of the custom officers, but it never became operational. I think it was under Minister Malvin Joseph. It replaced the customs service charge, I think it was called. But Mr. Speaker, the point that I want to make and to emphasize, in those days when I was so close to our esteemed Prime Minister and sat at his right side in his office, when he used to sign hundreds and hundreds of these duty-frees, and I would say, well, Mr. Prime Minister, why are you signing all these duty-frees? He says, young Asot, you won't understand. You won't understand. He says, let me explain to you, and permit me, Mr. Speaker, to go a little side off and sidetrack. He said, you know, when I was at the Swiss American Bank, before there, one of the first companies I had as a young businessman and young entrepreneur was a rental car company in this country. And nothing gave me more pleasure than being able, when I reached to the Swiss American Bank as a loan officer, to be able to give young people loans to buy their first vehicle, be it a used car or a new car from Hadid or Ryan or Hani. It was a pleasure that I felt in my heart. And now that I hold the office and the keys to power of this land as Prime Minister, and I have by the stroke of a pen that I can sign away a duty-free for a young, poor Antiguan and Barbudan who cannot afford it, you do not know the joy in my heart, the joy and the pride that it gives me, that I can say to a person that cannot afford it, that is only earning maybe a meager $2,000 a month, $500 a week, Mr. Speaker, that I can exempt them from the duty and the RRC. And that was the Prime Minister knew back then in 2014, 2015, 2016, right up to 2018. And he was signing duty-frees right up to 2023, like if they were going out of style. So it became a practice, a tradition in the country, part of the DNA, part of the psyche. Of course it's not a right, it's not a fundamental right. We accept that. But when people are accustomed to something, and they go to their minister, they go to their parliamentarian, the respective parliamentarian, and the parliamentarian now is going to tell them, well, it's the law. And they're going to blame you, Mr. Prime Minister. Don't think any of them over there are happy. They're going to say, Augustin pass him, go to he. And the Prime Minister do him, he wicked, go to he. And they're going to come to you. Well, your pockets are deep, but their pockets may not be as deep as yours. And the burden now is going to be on each politician to help those poor people to either go get the comptroller of customs to go on a payment plan, or the minister or the parliamentarian to go in his pocket and to help him to pay the duty or the RRC, whatever cannot be waived. Because the reality is, how much does a teacher make? How much does a fireman make? A police constable? Our frontline workers, the EMS workers? You're going to tell your EMS workers who are so loyal, so dedicated to service and country, your nurses, Mr. AG, your policemen and women who are underpaid, you are going to tell them now, oh, I cannot waive RRC for you, I only can waive 50% of the duty on a vehicle for you? You think they're going to be happy? This is disempowerment. Mr. Prime Minister, I remember when you ran against the late Sir Lester Bird in your mini manifesto. You said, should the people of the Antigua and Barbuda Labour Party give you the chance to lead the party and ultimately become the Prime Minister, you shall lead an egalitarian government, an all-inclusive where you will uplift the poor. You even spoke in that little manifesto of your own personal trials and tribulations and your challenges growing up in the very, very hard and difficult times that you went through as a child and a young teenager and adolescent, where you had to lift yourself up from your own bootstraps, where as a teenager you had to go to the Antigua Princess Margaret School and excel academically, because you did not even have the financial resources to eat a proper lunch or a proper dinner while you were living in the Point. And then you had to move to Gray's Farm, and one time in your life move to Potter's, where sometimes you had to eat out of the Rastaman and them calabash.
Member for St. Peter, kindly tell me what part of the bill you're speaking to.
Thank you, sir. But the point is, Mr. Speaker,
Kindly point me to the...
that I will get back on point, that this revenue miscellaneous provision bill, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, well, if that is what you're talking to, what you were saying just now
I understand.
is out of order, so move on.
I move on. But I have to show how draconian this bill is. This bill is not helping the poor people in this country. This bill is not in alignment with the philosophy of V.C. Bird and Lester Bird and even Gaston Brown. This bill is taken away from the poor and vulnerable people of this country, which they are accustomed to. Now, I'm not saying that there have not been abuse in the system, where different ministers or prime minister may have abused the system and signed too many. But you must have discipline. You must be able to curtail yourself. You can't be an Asot Michael all the time. I expect the Prime Minister and the Minister of Environment to be able to curtail and to know when to say no and enough is enough. If one person comes to you with 5 duty-frees in the space of 3 months, I expect you to say, well, I gave you 1 5 months ago. You keep records. You have your secretaries, Mr. Member, and Prime Minister in your office, that each duty-free is recorded. But it's not just duty-free on vehicles. Although you were proud and you boasted to this Parliament that you gave away in excess, I think the number I stand corrected, 30 or 40,000 used vehicles in the space of 10 years from 2014 to 2024, Mr. Speaker. You took on the giants of this country. You took on the great Hadid. You took on Ryan. You took on Hani. They all came to your offices protesting, threatening to close down, threatening to send home their workers. Many meetings I sat in. The Honourable Member for St. John's City East and the Chairman of the Finance Subcommittee, Sir Robin Yearwood, where they came and they protested that you were signing too many duty-frees and you were sending their businesses bankrupt. They could not bring in any more new vehicles. And your answer to that was, they have made enough millions over the years. The poor people must survive. The poor people must have a chance to own a vehicle. That was your answer. How can we stop that now? Where has this sudden change of heart come from, Mr. Speaker? This 360-degree turn in the interest of expediency? This is what we really call good governance. This is what we call tightening our belt. Because the financial wizards at the Ministry of Finance all of a sudden have told us that we can't balance our budget and we want our numbers to look good. Which government ever stays in power by balancing a budget? Which government? The great United States of America has the largest deficit in the world for so many years. The largest deficit, trillions of dollars they keep borrowing. So what is this thing that you want to look as the best prime minister with the best numbers? Well, when the IMF come and tell you to send home 5,000 public sector workers, you're going to do it? You're going to do it? That's the question. How far are we going to go down the road? Where are we going to draw the line in the sand to say enough is enough? It's not just on vehicles. What about the newly youngsters that have gotten married and built a home, their first time home ever, and they come to the Minister of Finance and they say, listen, we would like to get duty-free. And I know when I sat in the cabinet, you had a policy for first-time home owners. I hope that that will still continue. I hope that this act, and I stand corrected, that this act will not take away that. Because I know that you gave up to a certain amount, maybe $200,000 on building materials, and I hope the National Housing Company and Chapel still gives that, and that this act will not curtail you, and you will still be able to extend the RRC to those young people, both on the importation of their construction materials and on their furniture and furnishings. I am saying that you cannot tie your hands, Mr. Prime Minister. You have to have that discretion. You have to have that discretion. If you want to have an accountability that you report to Parliament, I have no difficulty with that. I have absolutely no difficulty whether you want to gazette it, as the previous law says, as the member for St. Philip's South read out, that the current law says it must be gazetted weekly, or if you want to change the law that is quarterly reports or semi-annual reports to Parliament, I have absolutely no difficulty with that. But I am saying to you, Mr. Prime Minister and member for St. John's Rural City West, that you cannot limit yourself. You cannot come to Parliament for every single duty-free over $10,000. It's nonsense. It's ludicrous. What we really need to be doing here is not attacking the poor people of this country, but revising and looking at the Tourism Incentives Act and policing that. Looking at the Antigua and Barbuda Incentives Act on the ABIA and policing that. Because every single new hotel that comes to this country, they come to the cabinet and they say, listen, I'm building a brand new hotel And it's going to cost 100 million US, 150 million US. And they exaggerated, Mr. Speaker. They exaggerated. Inadvertently, they exaggerated. And in the old days, when you had B.T. Lewis and these good engineers at Public Works, you had a whole team. Under Lester Bird, under the Ministry of Economic Development, Mr. Minister, you also had a team there. I asked the Prime Minister when I was Minister and had that portfolio, and he shot me down and refused to staff it. You must fight for it. And your team would collaborate with Public Works, and the plans must be submitted to Public Works and your ministry to ascertain the square footage, the number of rooms, and to have a quantity surveyor. You asked B.T. Lewis, Henderson Simon is dead, but they had a quantity surveyor in the Ministry of Economic Development who would quantify to say, well, listen, this project is only 50 million US, or 75, not 100 or 150 million dollars. So under the Antigua Tourism Incentives Act, you're only entitled to 10 years rather than 15 or 20. Under the Antigua and Barbuda Incentives Act, and you know what they do, Mr. Speaker? They look at both acts, and they take from both acts the best. I was minister, I know. I served under Lester Bird for years and under Aston Brown, and the minister can testify when he gets up. They look at both acts and they take the best from both. And we are one of the few territories, I shouldn't use the word territory, one of the few countries that waive withholding tax. And that is a big loophole. So Robin here would have always said and advocated in cabinet that we should plug that loophole and not have the waiver of withholding tax. And on top of the waiver of withholding tax, Mr. Speaker, they have permission after their tax holidays expired. So suppose they get a 15-year tax holiday or a 20-year tax holiday. They have the permission to carry forward losses for further 7 years. Where do you hear that? Surely not in Barbados. Surely not in St. Lucia or in St. Kitts. Yes, I know we have to be competitive to attract foreign direct investment. But the cabinet are not quantity surveyors. The cabinet cannot just sit on a letter or proposal or business plan from some hotelier, Sandals or whoever it may be, that come to your country and say, I'm building this project or I'm building this hotel in 150 million US. You must have proper, qualified quantity surveyors, architects, construction people at Public Works to look at these plans. The plans must be submitted. Other thing is the list. The list of building materials has to be submitted to Public Works and checked off, and to the Ministry of Economic Development and Tourism, and policed. And policed. So if they say they're bringing in 50 rolls of steel, 3/4 and 50 of 1/2 inch, and 10,000 blocks to build a hotel, they can't come back and say they want 20,000. But it's being done, it's being abused. And these are the loopholes that we can tighten. I'm not saying to take away the taxes or holidays from these hotels or business people. There are some that we need to take away. There are some, Mr. Speaker, like Mill Reef and Jumbie Bay, and down at Pigeon Point, all those $1 million and $1 billion homes, and Galley Bay. I don't think they have enjoyed them for many, many years, especially Mill Reef and Jumbie Bay. And I do not think that those homes, whether it be new homes or repairs or renovations for those multi-millionaires or billionaires, should continue enjoying duty-free, and not just duty-free on the imports of building materials, every single thing. Even glass for the golf course at Jumbie Bay, even the mulch for the landscaping, every single thing is duty-free. And ABST, not just duty, RRC, ABST, Mill Reef, Toot, Moon, Sam, Bagay they get. That cannot be right, Mr. Speaker. That cannot be right. They sell their homes. If they sell their homes, they pay absolutely no transfer taxes. Neither the vendor, neither the purchaser. How can that be right? Can't be right. The time has come, they've gotten it enough years, they've built up the island, they've invested into the country, they've invested substantially, but there must be a cut-off period. There must be a cut-off period. I'm not here standing up attacking anybody, Mr. Speaker. But God has inspired me to stand here today, and it will be less than Asot Michael not to stand here. I'm not playing no politics. I'm not scoring no cheap points. But I am saying, and I don't care who gets vexed, I'm saying that the Hadiths have gotten enough. This building, this government complex has 30 years. I don't care who negotiated it and signed it. 30 years tax holiday. 30 years tax holiday on rental. Why? I rent to the government. I have to pay tax. I have to pay property tax on my Neva Street building and my late mother. There are other buildings owned by private sector people on Fiscal Road that are not paying property tax, that the same UPP all waived, and we had to honor it. The same sunshine government, yes, Fiscal, leader of the opposition, you all waived. For many business places on Fiscal Road, and we came into government, and we had to honor it. Those taxes must be taken away. It's outrageous. Outrageous. You have a power plant operating and supplying 100% power to your country, and you have a 30-year tax holiday. Yes, they've taken risk. Yes, they've spent millions of dollars in the initial investment, but they've already gotten a 30-year tax holiday, Mr. Speaker. They've already enjoyed 30 years tax holiday. You're going to give them another 30 years to make 60? You understand why this country is poor?
Member for St. Peter.
Yes, sir.
Speak to the bill.
I'm speaking to the bill, sir.
You are not speaking to the bill. You're attacking people outside of Parliament, have nothing to do with the bill. Speak to the bill.
Mr. Speaker, I am not attacking anybody. I'm speaking to the bill as best as I can. And I'm saying that we are curtailing the power of the Minister of Finance to give discretionary taxes to poor people in this country, while the rich are getting away scot-free. Isn't that speaking to the bill? You tell me, Mr. Speaker, how is that not speaking to the bill? If you want me to sit down, you can tell me to sit down, I take my seat. But I want to know, if I am comparing what the poor is being asked to pay, and you're taking away from them, that they're accustomed to, for over 25, 30 years in this country, both administrations, and what you have been giving to the rich, and they're accustomed to, and now you are saying to the country, we are bleeding, we are bankrupt, we need to plug loopholes, we need to balance our budget, we need to continue building roads and infrastructure and paying for health care and education. So we cannot have no more discretionary waivers. The time has come to stop it. That's in essence why we are coming here. That's the motivation for the bill. In the explanatory memorandum, we have not, Mr. Speaker, been really fair to the country. In fact, it's the first bill where I don't see a detailed explanatory memorandum. You know, it doesn't really tell you the rationale, and I think the leader of the opposition asked earlier today, and the members for St. Philip's South when the Prime Minister was presenting, why? Why? What's the rationale? What's the reason? What's the motive for this bill? And the Prime Minister, I hope when he winds up, will tell us. He can't just say it's to curb the discretion of the minister. So what you're saying, Mr. Speaker, the minister and the Prime Minister are irresponsible human beings? They're not capable of controlling their own selves? They're not capable of knowing when enough is enough? They're not capable of setting a threshold or ceiling? And no, well, you know, we have given away 100 million and this is the target for the year and we can't exceed 100 million? That's all I'm asking. I'm not trying to stray away or attack anybody, so I do not want it to be seen that I'm standing here, Mr. Speaker, trying to attack anybody. It's not right. I'm just saying that this bill, in reviewing it, in looking at it last evening, I do not think it's right, equitable, and just. And I'm not playing politics. I'm saying that previous cabinets had the authority and the exemption to the respective ministers to waive these things. If they were abused, that is a different matter. That is a different discussion we can have at a different time. But I do not believe that we should go through with this bill as it is. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.